Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And today I am so delighted to have the amazing Gillian Wray with me. And Gillian and I connected recently through a mutual friend. And we had a short chat, didn't we, Gillian, before organising this date? And I know you are in for a treat. So let me just introduce Gillian. She is a poet, a mentor, and a founder of the podcast Unmuted, and also community and creative space for women reclaiming their voice. After 2 decades in education and a personal journey through silence, illness, and reinvention, Gillian now guides others to speak with power, write with truth, and share their work with the world. Her work blends a poetic storytelling, somatic practice, and mythic symbolism, creating spaces where women feel both seen and stirred into action. Whether through workshops, coaching, or fierce little audio truths on TikTok, Gillian helps women unmute not just their voice, but their presence, purpose, and creative fire. She believes your story is not too much and your voice is not too late. Gillian, oh my goodness, what a wonderful bio.
Thank you for that. That's lovely. Thank you for having me here, Robin.
I am absolutely delighted. I can't wait to see where our conversation takes us this afternoon. So, just before we start, I always ask my guests 3 questions just to help us focus in. The first of those questions is, what makes your story relatable for others?
I think the reason that my story is relatable is I think because all of us have something inside of us that we've kept quiet, that we've been hiding from the world, that we're a little bit afraid to show. It's like we know this is true about us. We know we maybe have this skill or this talent or this personality trait, but we don't really want everyone to know. We don't feel safe to show it to everyone. And so I think my story is about how actually when you do start to show that, not only is it not awful and terrible, but it actually does promote growth and change in yourself.
Cool. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening to our conversation?
I think people who are on the edge of thinking about how they would like to put something new into the world. So, or who've been thinking about for a while, how do I share this? Then I think those people would benefit the most.
Fantastic. And what do you hope people will take away?
That your voice matters, that what you have to say is important, and that just because you haven't found the person that it resonates with yet doesn't mean that person isn't out there. And that when you start talking about what's true for you inside, you find your people. So hopefully that's what people will take away.
Fantastic. So let's start by exploring a little bit of your story. How did you first come to realize that maybe you weren't fully expressing your true self?
I think, like a lot of things, it happens when you meet a big transition in your life. And for me, that was cancer, but it wasn't actually the process of going through chemotherapy and treatment. That lasted quite a long time. That lasted for about 19 months. It was at the end when my oncologist said to me, okay, go live your life. And I thought, how? Everything that I had before is completely changed and completely different. I don't have the same job. I don't live in the same country. There's been massive global shifts because I got cancer during 2020, during the pandemic. And and I don't even know who I am anymore. And that was when I started going back to the things that I hadn't been saying about myself, the things that I hadn't been sharing with the world. And for me, that was my writing and my poetic and my creative side, that I had been happy being a teacher. I had been happy being a mum. I'd been happy being a teacher. I'd been happy being all of those things. But now they'd ended. What was I now? So it was that kind of big moment, really, that came for me.
And what that was kind of, I guess, the kickstart to the process, but where did you go? How did you begin to explore? So, who am I now?
Mm,
Where does my
yeah.
life go from here? So, that process of starting to unmute, what was that like? How did that look?
Well, I'd always been someone who was introspective in a way anyway, because I was a journaler. I wrote in journals. I had hundreds of notebooks of things that I'd written, and I had also written lots of little poetic snippets in there throughout the time. And the thing was, is that, and this is the thing, is like you can be somebody who writes and be quite introspective, but I think if you don't share that, if you don't speak with someone else, if you don't actually tell anyone else, it's like you're in your own loop, really, and you're just kind of going round and round in it. And what happened was that I decided to go through these notebooks I had. I had hundreds of them. I was just going through boxes and I found them, and I found this one which was called like just a tiny little fragment, and it said, "Bring forth your orphan lines." And I thought, oh, that's a nice phrase. Did I write that?
Isn't it
That feels,
amazing how you read back your own words and you think,
yeah.
was that, did I say that? Where, did I get that from somebody? Is it mine?
That's what I thought. It's like, bring forth. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I started to go through all these books. And in a way, these books were like fragments of me. They were all the parts of me that I'd been sort of talking about to myself for a very long time. And then there were also poems in there as well. And I started to publish them. I started to put them on the internet. One or two I posted on Facebook, and people were like, oh, "I love these. Do you have more?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, I do." And it was through that writing and exploring myself through writing, but also through sharing it with other people, that I started to actually think, well, who do I want to be? Well, this part of me that I've just done in notebooks, I want to do this, and I want to do this publicly. And I also did, I started something called the Artist Way. Have you heard of that, with Julia Cameron? And there were a lot of exercises in there that weren't just about writing your thoughts down. They were actually helping you to examine what it is you truly want. Because I think sometimes we get so busy with life, we forget what we want. We don't even recognize our own desires. And through some of the exercises in that, I started to think, I do one thing. I'll tell you one that actually surprised me. So she has this thing about, like, you write 5 lives that you would live if you weren't living the life that you were living. And I was writing this, and just sort of like subconsciously, it was like, I'd be a performer on the stage, and I thought, I'm so shy, I'm so quiet, I'm such an introvert. Why would I write this? Why would I say that? I'd never want to do that. But then as I thought about it, I thought, oh yeah, when I was a teenager, I was in My Fair Lady at the school, and if I was in those days I was in church, if I would be very happy to get up and read a piece that I'd written. What happened to her? What happened to that person? And that was when I realized, actually, performing, creating, writing was a huge part of me, and I just hadn't really been feeding it.
And it's interesting how, whether it comes from outside or our response to what people have said to us, or where we feel we're labeled, oh, you're the quiet one, or you're the introvert, and this is the other person in the class or group who
Mm.
is the extrovert. So, okay, well, they're the ones who are always putting themselves forward, and I'm always the shrinking violet. versus, well, maybe I'm an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert.
Mm.
Because I think there are lots of people like that across the world who, in certain situations, are quite happy to take a back seat and observe. They're much more
Yeah.
observers generally. But then something will happen that just, this is my moment. This is where I have something that I feel it's time for me to contribute rather than just observe. And I think that's a fascinating process of that self-exploration and who am I really? Because I'm not one thing, am I?
No, I think that's what really came to it is like, yes, I am somebody who can be very quiet and I am somebody who can sit in a room and observe because I find human nature and human interaction fascinating. And if someone is passionate about something, I want to hear about it. I'm very interested in it. So I'm not necessarily going to push myself forward. But when I had the opportunity to talk about what I love and what I want to do, I didn't know what it was. And then I realized it was lots of things, it was a multitude of things, and that I wasn't just one. And I think that's something that I do a lot in my work now, working with archetypes and archetypal and this sort of mythic resonance. And as a writer, you know, when you have hundreds of characters in a book, like they all have a little bit of you in them, you know. And that's kind of what I'm bringing forward to people now when I'm talking about things with people in my community. I'm talking, well, we're not just one thing. How do we express these other parts of ourselves? How do we allow this part of us to have more self-expression than the part that's currently doing the role that we're giving it?
And I came across something recently around the concept of be yourself and that idea that maybe myself is a particular thing. So that if I am being different in different situations, then I'm not being true to myself. I'm not being authentic. I'm molding, shaping myself to the other people maybe in the situation versus no, in that situation, a different aspect of me comes out to play because in that situation, that's what's appropriate. So rather than judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves for being different in different situations, just, oh, I get to play. I loved play and
Oh,
fun and that whole concept. So I get to play different ways in different situations. I'm still me because
yeah.
each one of those is drawing on a different aspect of myself. And I was in a networking meeting this morning, and there's a guy there whose business is called Many Purple Hats because
I
I
love that.
think he likes hats, but also it's that idea of I can wear different hats in different situations. And the conversation we were having was all around connection and how we find out more about ourselves through our connection with others because people reflect back
Yes.
different aspects of ourselves, different things that they see within us, and we see different aspects of ourselves in other people. Like you say, reading that book where you've got all the different characters and each one
Yeah.
is a different part of me or a different part of me is in them. But
Yeah.
equally, they say that what you like in somebody, or sorry, what you dislike in somebody, people normally focus on what you dislike in somebody is because, well, there's an aspect of that in you too. But I equally say what
Mm.
you admire in somebody, and you might be sitting there thinking, gosh, I wish I was more like that in that person. You are, perhaps it's just that part of you that's been muted and hasn't had the chance to come out to play.
Exactly. That's so true. Like, if you, I always say as well, if you admire something in someone, like, if you're like, that person's really funny or they're really playful or whatever, I'm not like that. And you're like, well, if you want it, if you desire it, if you think that's wonderful, then there's a part of you that's trying to be that, that it wants that. It doesn't just want to be with that, it wants to be it. So how could you allow yourself to do that? Just a little tiny bit more. Not like you don't have to become that person. That's not what you're saying. It's saying it's like notice what you like, what you're attracted to, what you're drawn to. Yeah, very much so.
And allow that part of you to be unmuted and to have that expression.
Yeah.
So, what process did you follow, or what steps do you think are good to take? I loved when you talked about the journaling, and I love a good journal prompt. I think
Yeah.
is excellent for helping us to go deeper because sometimes we need a little bit of guidance, somebody to shine that light and say, try this route, and then it can branch off as you feel fit. But what would you say if somebody's going, well, I don't know. I don't even know where to start?
I think like with you just talked about mirrors a minute ago, and I think there's lots of different ways that we can mirror, and journal prompts is one of them. It's fantastic. I love a good journal prompt. And it's like that journal prompt about like the 5 different lives that you would lead if you weren't living. And the more creative, I think, the more you can tap into that sort of playful, and you're just writing. No one needs to see it. You don't need to share it with anyone. It's just you having a little bit of playfulness and thinking about, oh, what could I do if I didn't want to do this? And I think, and go wild. And maybe even it's not even something that you would ever end up doing. Like one of mine was that I said that I would travel by horseback across like some, I'm never going to do that. You know what I mean? But what does that tell you about yourself? It's like when you write this down, what is it actually saying? Well, it's saying that maybe you feel a little bit constrained where you are. You want to do something a bit more outdoorsy. You want to, what does it actually say to you rather than what is the imaginative thing? You don't have to go and become a Mongolian horseman. Like no one's saying that. Well, for me, actually, that one was that I'd written down that, you know, I wanted to like travel by horseback and sleep under the stars. So I went camping to kind of get that to, oh, maybe I want to spend more time outdoors. It's like finding what it's saying underneath what it's saying. Um, and so, yeah, I would definitely recommend journaling, but I would also recommend talking because this is why I started Unmuted, was because I felt like journaling's great, but what if you just need that little prompt, that little push, that little somebody else to recognize it in you? You're right. When you're doing the journaling, that's the mirror that recognizes it in yourself. But when you're with you, like you were saying with your networking this morning as well, when you're with somebody else, you're seeing it, they're seeing it. And then they're like, oh, I recognize that spark in you. And then you're like, okay, well, where can we kind of take that? So yeah, getting community.
Absolutely. And if you can find those people
Mm,
who ask the good questions,
yes.
I love people who listen, take a moment of pause, and then because they're filtering it all through and they're processing it, and then they come out with that question that takes you right to the core of the issue. And it might be a little bit, ooh, it
Hmm.
might be a little bit, yikes. I don't have an answer to that, but that's fine because then we can get to explore it with the person. And well, it might be a bit of this and it might be a bit of that, but actually, no, saying that, that makes me think that it's this. Similar to the idea of I'm going to go and ride horseback across the steppes. I may never be going to actually ride horseback across the steppes, but what, like you say, what does that say? What is that archetype revealing to me? That
Mm.
actually I wish my life was freer, or I wish my life was more outdoorsy, or I wish I was more in tune with nature or my nature.
Exactly. And you don't know what it is until you start asking those questions. And that's where the conversation happens. So the journaling is great to get the prompts up, but the conversation is, well, what do you think it might mean? And stuff like that. And something that I think happens really well in sort of in a circle, in a women's circle or in a community is that when someone else says something, it resonates with you. And then it lands inside of you and you feel it somatically and you're like, oh, that's what it is. And you don't necessarily get that from journaling. You might get something, you might get a start, but you get when, oh, yes, that what she just said. Yes, that's how I feel too. And that being met in and feeling like you're not alone as well in your ideas and feeling like you're not the only person who feels like this is really important as well.
It's very affirming.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
thing,
definitely.
Brene, I'm a great fan of Brene
Yeah.
Brown and her work, and she says that point when somebody says, me too.
Yes.
And you suddenly no longer feel like the odd one out.
Mm. And that's what and when we talking archetypally as well, you find that actually, in some way or another, everyone kind of resonates with an archetype in some way. And when somebody else says, "Oh yes, that's me too. That's me as well," and you don't. It's not that you suddenly run off and go, "Okay, well that's what I'm going to change my whole life because of that." But it's like it just resonates with you, and you feel less like I'm the only person. Because this is what happened for me when I started Unmuted. When I started my podcast, originally, the idea of it was that I'd started writing poetry and I'd felt poetry was really helpful. It had helped me through grief, it had helped me through transition. And I wanted to speak to other people who'd felt the same and talk to them about why. But as I started interviewing people, I realized that the theme that kept coming up was that they felt that there were things that they hadn't been able to say. They felt they'd been constrained. And I thought, oh, I'm the only person that said that felt like that. Or I've talked about something on my podcast and someone sent me a message, someone I wouldn't expect, saying, I always felt like that too in my workplace. And you're like, oh. And I think just talking about the things that we think maybe that we don't want to talk about. This is what I was saying before in the beginning about when I started, I didn't want to talk about, I was a little bit ashamed about it, but it's like it actually gets rid of shame. Like I was a little bit ashamed that I was somebody who would not speak their mind, that would just agree with people. And I didn't actually want people to know that about me. But when I started talking about it, I was like this and now I'm trying to change and I'm in the process. Other people came forward and saying, yeah, me too. And that kind of, again, I think shame, I think, is the biggest limiter on personal growth and change. Because and when that kind of dissipates and disappears, then you can really start to move forward because you're like, oh yeah, it's not just me. I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that feels like that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And that was why Stephen, my original colleague on this podcast, why he and I set this up and why we called it vulnerability, introspection and growth. Because that vulnerability is often around, I don't want to say this because I'm ashamed and I'm bound to be the only person who feels like this. It's just me. And I don't want to out myself as being the one weirdo
Yes.
in this group of people who all seem to get the rules, understand everything in the same way. I don't want to be the one who stands out and goes, no, I'm different. And
Yeah.
my husband has this thing where he says to me, I'm not weird, you're weird. And I say, thank you, because
Yes.
I can now embrace my weirdness.
And then when you actually start to embrace these little bits of you that you maybe didn't really think that people would like, and the weird thing is you find the people who do like them. You find when I was hiding behind not really wanting anyone to know that I was a poet because I thought, oh, I had this thing about the word poet. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I thought it was kind of elitist um, and like if I said that I was a poet, I thought people would think I was higher than I ought to be, that I was being pretentious. I wasn't. I was just saying I write poetry, but I was judging what I thought other people would think of me instead of just doing the thing and seeing what people think of you. And I think that's something that's really true as well. Like we build this imaginary audience in our minds of what we think that people think of us. And the reality is nothing like that at all. You say, oh, I write poetry, people go, oh, lovely. I'd love to read some of it. Or oh, I do too. And I've met all of these closet poets since I've started talking about poetry, people who've been using it just as they're not sharing it, they're not publishing it necessarily, they're just writing it as a way of self-expression. And I've also met loads of fantastic poets who I've shared with and who I've learned from, and how my own work is now developing. Because instead of being like, oh, I don't really want to say that this is what I do, I tell people, and then people are like, oh, yeah, me too. And your connection grows from it as well.
And that's the wonderful thing, isn't it? When we do speak out, share our truth,
Mhm.
own our truth, and step into that vulnerability, we
Yeah.
realize, well, we don't need to feel shame. And we suddenly have this amazing connection. We suddenly find our true tribe rather than the people pleasing tribe,
Yeah.
where we don't feel like we fit in and we feel like we're a failure because we're not being ourselves. And do they really like me?
Hmm.
Versus, no, I'm just being true. And
Yeah.
then, but we do like you. We like you a lot because, yeah, we feel the same. And you were talking about it doesn't change necessarily, it doesn't make drastic changes in your life. But I think it may not make changes on the surface, but underneath, I think that's where it really does make a big difference to how you feel inside of yourself.
how you carry yourself through the world when these changes have happened. To the outside world, you might look exactly the same. But if you're feeling more yourself, if you're feeling less like you're hiding, you can walk into a room with a different kind of confidence. You can walk into a room and just beam because you know exactly who you are inside. And or you're working it out. Not saying we'll all get there, but you're working on it, and you're not afraid of the parts of you that you tried to hide. Because then sometimes we're hiding them from ourselves as well. But when you get less afraid of that, then and you deal with them, and you journal and you talk and you're witnessed, then you can walk more confidently into some of the bigger, scarier rooms that were a bit scarier to walk into in the olden days.
And in doing that, in giving ourselves permission, it's like that wonderful quote from Marianne Williamson, where she talks about we're not afraid so much of our shadow, but actually of our light. Like you were saying about, I can't stand up and own the fact that I'm a poet because I'm going to look like I'm being
Yeah,
stepping outside of, being bigger than my boots, trying to
yes,
find the right metaphor. But in doing that, we give permission to others to do that as well. So we don't just unmute ourselves.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is the phrase. It's like I thought people would think I was bigger than my boots. Who does she think she is? And that was actually that question. And you talked about powerful questions before. That was in a coaching session that I was in with a coach. Someone said to me, I said, "Well, who am I to do this?" And she just looked at me and she just asked it right back at me. Well, who are you to do it? And somehow it just landed, and I was like, "Well, I'll tell you who I am." And it's just like you yeah, it's sometimes it's just the right question, isn't it? And the people who and that pause as well before they say it, which means you've already started thinking there.
Or Marianne Williamson's question, who are you not to?
Oh, I love that way of framing it. I love that. Yeah, yeah, very much.
So just to wrap up, what key message would you love people to take away from our conversation?
I would love people to start thinking about the places in their life where they have maybe muted themselves, and just think about pressing that unmute button just a little bit, just to try it. Just try it out, see how it goes. And yeah, and just start to explore that self-expression.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gillian. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who've been watching, listening to this conversation and thinking, I want more. I want to read Gillian's poetry. I
Yeah.
want to check in. Where can they find you?
I am on social media. You can find me on Facebook under my own name, Gillian Wray. You can find me on Instagram under my trade name, The Sovereign Poet. And you can find me on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you listen to podcasts for the Unmuted podcast. And if you're interested in more of that, do get in touch and I will tell you how to join my community. My book is on Amazon. It's called Sacred Embers, and it's on Amazon and Amazon KU. And this is a book which I made from all the fragments of poetry that I have found in my poetry books when I was going through that process. And it's I called it A Dance of Becoming as a subtitle, because it's like when you feel like everything's in pieces, it's about rebuilding and about embrace. And you like it, there's one in there is about wild, embracing your wild side and moving onto that. Anyway, yes, those are all the ways that you can find me. And I would be delighted to hear from anyone who's been touched by something that I've said today and would like to explore it more.
Fantastic. And there's an invitation. So if you have been touched by anything that Gillian has mentioned today, do get in touch. And I will put all of her links below this video on YouTube, and also a link to your book as well, Gillian. Thank you. And I love the subtitle because wild, the D in wild is all about dance. So
Yes.
the dance of becoming just fits perfectly. If you enjoyed this episode, do feel free to share it and hit that subscribe button. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.